Nice. Thank you.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today. And thank you, Adam, so much for coming to speak to our community. So we are covering the topic building a free and open cloud one deployment at a time with Unfurl with Adam today. A little bit of Adam about his background. So he is a serial entrepreneur. How he just mentioned before this recording, he has probably started approximately 5 companies, exited 3, if I'm correct. And I will lead the more in-depth description of himself to Adam. And this is our 6th session of chapter 4. And it is hosted by GoUp and in collaboration with our partnership company, MetaBob. Quickly about our agenda today. So we'll start with the short kickoff, which I'll cover. From there, we'll move to Adam's presentation. After his presentation, we will take a short break to think about questions for Adam and grab some water in at least Azerbaijan and Oregon, where we are literally losing water all the time because it's so hot outside. And after that, we'll quickly move to question and answers, where Adam will take time to answer your questions and you get a chance to ask questions from him personally. And after that, we'll wrap up this session and we'll see you guys tomorrow in our another one. So quickly about myself. So my name is Axel. As I already mentioned before this webinar, I am probably the most untechnical person here watching this webinar, and I will be the host today. About myself outside of work a little bit, I'm really passionate about sports. I used to play football myself, and I also love watching basketball, especially NBA and Portland Trail Blazers. I'm also very passionate about different technologies that enhance employee productivity. As I mentioned, this is the session 4 of chapter 04 and is hosted with a partnership with our partnership company MetaBob, which is the fast, easy, and visual way of debugging code. So it is an AI-assisted tool that reduces developers' debugging time by half on Python code currently. With this being said, we also have our contributor award. So during this chapter, everyone who joins 8 out of 10 sessions that are hosted in this chapter will get a contributor award from us for their high engagement and contributions to our community. So let's begin chit chat time. And this is familiar for people who have done it before, but we once again have a Jamboard. So I'm gonna drop the link in the chat, and I'll need to stop sharing for a second in order to do that. So bear with me. There we go. So everyone, please open Jamboard, and there's a couple questions posted on Jamboard. I'm also gonna open it on my screen. So I see people joining already. Thank you. And so there's 2 questions. The first one on this page is that what do you wish to learn from this webinar? To answer this question, please click the sticky note here on the left-hand side, which gives you an option of that. So there you can choose your color and write a question or a comment that what do you wish to learn? For example, I wish to learn how Adam validates his business ideas. So that is something that I'm very interested in. So I'll post it here. It's a non-technical thing, but it's still there. And on the second one, there is a question
Yeah,
that
so
what
I
kind
think
of projects?
we
Sorry,
need to change it. We need to change the permission. It's view only when you click share.
Oh no, it's anyone
Edit.
can view. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. Okay, I apologize for that. And on the second question, as I said, is well, now it's yep. On the second question, you can see that what kind of projects have you been working on this week? So I have been working on different kind of cloud project, growth projects. There we go. I want to learn from Adam as much as possible today. That's a great starting point. I agree with that 100%. Let's all take time to answer at least one of these two questions, and let's spend approximately 3 or 4 minutes here and give Adam an idea what people expect to learn from this webinar. Sako keeps exploring the different colors of his sticky note, clearly.
Yeah. There is.
All right, guys, let's not be shy. Let's post some questions to Adam here and comments. Akil here. I have no idea about deployment. I would love to know about it. Okay, so that's a great starting point. Thank you, Akil. Akil is one of our most active community members, and I'm pretty sure Akil will get the contributor award from this chapter, because I've seen Akil in every single session that we have had. So thank you, Akil, for your engagement.
Thanks for the webinars.
Of course. UX design and accounting and agile for a project this week. That's super cool. Alrighty, I'll go back to the presentation, but guys, you can also, throughout this webinar, feel free to use this Jamboard and add comments and questions here. So we'll take a look at it after and we'll post it to our presentation as well. So I'll quickly do this. Go back to my presentation mode, just one short second here. Perfect. I will share screen.
I can see the more than 8 people, but no one adds stickers. Why? Why are you just sitting there without writing anything?
Yes, let's guys get active again and make this interactive, since it's Adam's
Don't be
here
shy.
and we want to learn as much as possible. So as we said, we're going to do the polls in a different section today. So we're going to do the polls in middle of Adam's presentation today. And this is a quick overview of our audience for Adam also. So as you can see, a lot of people today have joined us from India. We also have someone from Nigeria, and also, of course, Baku, Azerbaijan is always represented in this community. So this is just a quick overview from locations where people have joined today. With this being said, let's quickly go over our code of conduct, which is super straightforward. So we're here to learn, benefit, and contribute. We do not accept any marketing, selling, or competing during this webinar. And the most important thing for us is that this community is an equal space. It doesn't matter what is your role or background here. We're all here to connect and learn and have fun together. So now I will stop sharing my screen for a second, and it's photo shoot time. Sako, do you do a photo shoot or do I do a photo shoot?
Yeah, please do. I'm on the iPad. Yeah.
Yep. All right, guys. So I can't do the pose, but usually we do peace pose or whatever pose you guys like. So let's open our cameras and let's take a picture all together.
Was it that or that? I forget.
It's usually this.
Okay.
This is victory.
There we go. Akil is here. Let's not be shy with cameras. Perfect. There we go. And oh no. 1 second. Great job. All righty. And then back to our presentation in a second. There we go. Oh no. Yep. And then I'll pass it back to Adam. So Adam, please share your screen and your presentation. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Adam, for agreeing to speak to our community. I'll let you share your screen here.
Can you see?
Yep, all good.
Good. All right, so I'm going to present mode. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is fun. Yeah, it's fun to peace sign is a new thing for me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this new project I've just started. It's called One Commons, and our vision behind building a free and open cloud. It's and I'll try to make this interactive. It's probably not going to be a full hour. So I saw that on the schedule, but there's a lot to talk about. It can be an hour if we want it to be, but there's not going to be an hour's worth of slides. And so I'll just start right now. So Axel said I've started a bunch of different kinds of companies before in the tech space. I'm here in San Francisco, but this one is a little different for me because it's combining a lot of non-entrepreneurial interests of mine around how can we build a free and open cloud around these ideas that didn't really seem commercially viable or just seem way out there. And I feel like the technology has come to a point where there's this opportunity to build this. And so we're a new company and it's an open source project. We started just a couple of months ago, but we call ourselves a mission-driven startup because we are dedicated to this idea of a free and open cloud. And what does that mean? And so the idea behind a free and open cloud is bringing open source, the ethos, the openness, the collaborative, methodologies that have made open source come to dominate software, bringing that to the cloud so that we can collectively own and control cloud services that basically now run our lives. And that's the big vision. And everyone knows this, but everything is moving to the cloud. Everything is becoming a service. Nobody wants to run their own software, let alone run their own hardware. And the benefits of having a cloud service is just, it's so easy to get started. You usually have usage-based pricing, so there's minimal upfront costs. And so that's been really great. But the downside of all this is that it's open source is having a hard time keeping up with this. So one, it's really kind of cannibalizing traditional open source business models. And so we've probably heard stories about like Elasticsearch and these different big vendors where the big cloud companies like, Amazon can just offer those services and the path to making money around open source is being undermined there. And then more broadly than these sort of big open source projects, there are just thousands of open source applications out there that are just not available as a SaaS service. They're popular, but maybe not popular enough to be part of AWS's offerings. And for whatever reason, the people behind it are not going to have a SaaS service. And so for most people, if there's an open source project that you want to use to run yourself or integrate into software you're developing, usually it's like you go to the README page and you follow a list of manual steps to deploy it. And that's how you do that. And so again, that's not a really good solution with everything moving to the cloud. And so so that kind of leaves developers in a quandary. So if you're building an application of any kind of complexity, you're probably going to have to rely on open source. And so you really have two options. So you could try to integrate it yourself and self-host it, and you get benefits. You get to it's open source, so you can control it. You can add your own value. You can add proprietary value around it. The costs, generally speaking, are going to be less long term, but the upfront costs are there. There's integration. It's hard to do. Or you could go with a proprietary service. So, with a database like Postgres, you can host it yourself, or you could use, Amazon's RDS. But then you have a lot of benefits. It's easy. The costs in the short term are going to be less usually, and you can integrate in with the other services easily. But then you have vendor lock-in. The long-term costs are usually there, and you lose flexibility. You have to use whatever the service gives you. It's hard to move around and switch and try other alternatives out as your needs change, as you scale. And so those are the downsides. And so, our solution for that is what we call open cloud services, which is the idea that having open source cloud services that give you the same ease and simplicity that you get with the cloud service, but without giving up the freedom and control of open source. And so how does it get us to this big vision of a free and open cloud? And so I'll kind of going through the steps. So the first step is, with these open cloud services, making it just incredibly easy to deploy and run open source applications. So if we could start with that. And then if you're deploying these open source onto your own cloud accounts, your own cloud infrastructure, if there was a way to just allow people to take just a small percentage of those hosting costs to fund the open source projects they depend on, and those projects in turn depend on the whole ecosystem that enables open source to be what it is today. If we could take that, and then together with this idea of these shareable, forkable open cloud services with a funding model, creates this whole new range of possibilities, and a new kind of ecosystem. It's a whole range of possibilities open up, and new forms of collaboration. And so that's our vision of how to get there. And so kind of talk a little bit more about this vision of a cloud. So when we say a free and open cloud, we're not saying it's an alternative to like AWS or any of these hyperscale cloud providers. I mean, the economics of scale around these massive infrastructures are unbeatable, basically. But if you, as a developer, as a user, can deploy these your applications on top of these open cloud services that you are running and you're controlling, you're essentially creating a kind of an overlay open cloud over those hyperscale providers, and you essentially end up long-term commoditizing what they're providing and allowing people having to control on top of it. And so that's our long-term vision for this. And so now, stepping back kind of a little bit down into nitty-gritty reality of what we're building today. So the first step in this journey is this tool we built called Unfurl, and we're building today. And that's a tool for deploying and managing online resources, in particular open source applications. And here's the first poll we're talking about.
Let me, I can pull it up right now. Relaunch poll 1. So can everyone see the poll right now?
Yep.
I see.
Yeah, so I could just quickly talk through it. So basically, my question is, in terms of like what we're trying to solve, is how are people deploying today? Like, what do you do? And so PaaS are these platform as a services that make it easy, that kind of these SaaS services like Heroku and OpenShift, which is based on Kubernetes. So that's an example.
All right, guys. So let's all answer. How do you deploy right now? If you don't know the answer, you can just pick the fifth option, which says "do not," which means that I don't know.
Sorry.
But it says cannot vote.
You can't vote?
Host and panelists cannot vote. Oh, okay. Host and panelists.
Yeah.
And on the iPad.
Can everyone in the audience see this as well? Humai, for example, Visa, Akil.
Can
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you see the poll?
I think they can, because 7 out of 12 people have already voted.
Oh, okay. For my end, it says 0 out of.
No.
No, 7.
I can see it too. I can.
Okay, then it's just on my end. I apologize for that then. Let's take 30 seconds more and then we'll finish this poll. And great thing that you all can see it. It's on my end for some reason then.
Yes, poll is visible.
Great, thank you. Alrighty, and then I'm gonna end this poll right now. There we go. Can you guys see because I got signed out because Rasim signed in from the same account. Can you guys see the results from the poll?
Should I press the share results button? That appears for me.
I have pressed.
Yeah.
Now it should be seen.
Okay.
Sharing poll, that's cool. So there's a three-way tie, it looks like, which is interesting. And nobody chose homegrown scripts or processes, which is interesting. But yeah, so if you look at it, so there's one don't know. That's a good answer. So yeah, so basically, so just think. So if you can see here, so if there's do the math here. So yeah, so about a third use DevOps, which is more sophisticated, and then 2/3 do more simpler things like use Heroku or manually do it. And so, oops, sorry. So yeah, so if you, the right way to do it, I guess, if you want to have complete control and flexibility for, hold on, it keeps coming up, is to use DevOps. But the answer with DevOps is, one, generally speaking, those tools require a degree of sophistication. They're designed for DevOps engineers. You know, the companies that develop it are developing solutions that are really geared towards the enterprise. And to run an online service and manage it, there's really no one solution. You have to use a variety of different tools and integrate it together. And so they're really tools. And so you can see some of the different common approaches and the different aspects they carry. And so what we want to do is make that a lot simpler. And so what Unfurl is well, right now, what we've built so far is it's a command line tool. It's self-contained. It's designed that you can just run it on your laptop. It's open source, of course. And the idea is it doesn't require a server. You can run it yourself anywhere. All the state for when you deploy, and this is one of the things that makes it different from other kinds of tools, are stored inside a user editable configuration that you store in Git. And so this is kind of part of this open cloud service vision, where all the information you need, you have control. It's not stuck in some proprietary service that you have to depend on. And so you can easily use this to rearrange, fork, clone services that you develop. It's based on a standard called Tosca, which I'm part of the standards group there. And so the question is, so why would you use this? And so one is, we want to build a tool that any developer could use. You don't have to be a DevOps guru to use it. So it hides the complexity underneath the covers. It works with any of these other tools like Terraform, but it provides a way to manage the complexity. So it gives you flexibility because you're creating these abstractions over the cloud providers. It gives you flexibility in how you can switch services easily, swap out different services that meet your needs. And like I was saying, well, when it's open source, of course, but there's no lock-in because it's dependent. All your data is stored in Git that you control, and it's designed to be cloud independent. You don't have lock-in, so Git gives you, again, the flexibility you get of not having locked into a particular cloud provider, a particular vendor solution, or a particular SaaS service. And so this is kind of a little bit driving deeper into the technical idea. So for open source developers, what this enables is they can create these simple service templates that are abstract, that describe the needs of their application. So for example, if you develop this application, it requires, obviously it'll require like a compute instance, like I need this much disk space, I need this much, computing power. You might say it depends on, say, for example, a database like Postgres or MongoDB, probably has to talk to DNS servers for the domain name, etc. So if an open source developer can easily create these service templates, and then when their users go to deploy it, and this is the differentiator from just other kinds of tools out there, the app Unfurl will figure out the needs that the user has. So if the user wants to run an RDS, it'll choose the right deployment template that works on Amazon. If they want to run it on a Google cloud provider, same with the database services, they could use the hosted version like that the cloud provider provides. They could use a self-hosted version. They could use a third-party service that provides a similar things, like we mentioned Redis earlier. If Redis has their own provider, and so by making it so easy for the user to swap out, they get to choose the components that meet their needs, and so the technology that enables that is this thing called Tosca. It's kind of a mouthful: topology and orchestration specification for cloud applications. I guess they thought it was a clever name. And again, I'm actually part of the standards committee that's defining it, but basically what it does is it allows you to build these abstractions. So you can create an abstract idea. Okay, this is a compute instance, and whether the compute instance is a particular service provider or even something more abstract like a Kubernetes pod, that doesn't make a difference. Or a Docker instance. So by able to creating these abstractions, we can now this goes into a little bit more detail about it. By creating these abstractions, it allows us to have intelligence about how to deploy the right solution for that particular user. And so just going a little bit into it. So basically this idea that you have these node templates and these relationship templates that describe the relationships and then how they connect together. And then when you go to deploy, you can find the right match, and that's the technology underneath there. And so you create this abstraction around that, and you can see that's kind of the story of what's been going on with so-called cloud native computing and these trends. You have these levels of abstractions that becomes more usable. So before you just had little computers that were people cobbled together, and then you had containerizations with Docker that was really revolutionized that, and that enabled people to package up their computers into these containers that were usable, and that enabled the next level things like Kubernetes and these orchestration technologies around services. And so basically what we're doing is kind of taking that to the next level, where we are encapsulating these DevOps processes. And so underneath the covers, we support, so we're not like trying to reinvent the wheel here. We rely on existing technology like Terraform or Ansible, or of course just command line tools. And they're kind of wrapped and described in these Tosca service templates. So that's how we get to abstraction, which allows you to have simplicity. And then on the other hand, we abstract how you install it, so you can support things like Helm and Kubernetes. And again, these different ways from the point of view of the user, they don't have to worry about whether it's Kubernetes under the surface, or they're using Docker, or even something simple like a supervisor. And so here's a processing model of what we're doing. So so basically, when you take these service templates and you take the configuration file, so we call them ensembles, which are the representation of the cloud service and the different components. And so the first step is we create an isolated runtime. So part of the idea of doing that is to enable reproducibility and to enable sharing. So by having an isolated environment for deployment, now people can share things more safely, like share these ways of deployment, and they can know that you're in an environment that's an exact reproduction of all the different software installed, so that again enables simplicity, so you don't have to worry about all these details about having the right configuration and the bugs that come from that. And then when you run when you run the command line tool, it invokes these isolated runtimes. It then creates an execution plan based on the configurators. We call them these plugins, like for Terraform and Ansible, et cetera. And then the final step is after it's deployed, it updates the state of the resources you deployed and stores that state and status in Git. And that's the really key to enabling this kind of flexibility to save that state. So it's not just in Amazon or wherever you deployed it. Now there's a representation that you have, and you can use this tool to move it somewhere else. And so diving down deeper into this is, so the YAML files that describe your cloud service kind of is a good reflection of the different aspects that you need in general to create these reusable and shareable components. And one is a context, which describes the environment that you need to run it in, like I was saying, the tools you need, what source code repositories it relies on, managing secrets, which is a key requirement and a key complexity that you have to solve, so that keep making sure that the secrets are kept separate, making sure that's really easy. You don't have to have like 5 different passwords and 10 different services and whatever to deploy, having all that managed in a central way. Then there's, of course, the spec, which is what we were just talking about before, which is a description of exactly what you want to be deployed. The status, which is what we talked about before, how it's deployed, representations of the resources you deployed into the cloud. And then finally, this section we call the lock section, which is what enables reproducibility, which is recording exactly the version, the digest, the hash of what artifacts you deployed, what repositories were used. And so that way you can have reproducibility, which is really key to enabling these open cloud services. So drilling back into a little bit more. So by creating context, you can, one, separate out local information from information that needs to be the same no matter where it is. That's one key thing. And so you have things like all the location information of like the repositories, the source code repositories. Again, we talk about secrets, what containers you rely on, how those containers are built, the artifacts, the service accounts, configurations, all those things we can encapsulate into these contexts, and then use this mechanism to have different versions of it. So whether it's production or staging or for development, and that you use those contexts for deploying. The spec, again, we talked a little bit about that. That's based on this thing called Tosca, that builds a model of what you want to deploy. And then the last two things, which is again, the idea that enables reproducibility and shareability. And so I think I'll go into a little bit more because that's really important and kind of unique about what we're doing, is that online services, of course, they're not deterministic. You can't, they're interacting in the environment and they're, dynamic. And so the idea is to create a form of reproducibility that's defined in the context of the services you're deploying. And so if you take reproducible artifacts, which is a lot of interesting work going on to create reproducible artifacts from source code, and you have an isolated environment, and then you have a deterministic process, and then on the other side, you create an isolated cloud environment so that what Unfurl is deploying into is something you control and is well-defined. You can have a degree of reproducibility, which again, all this stuff enables simplicity, ease of use, the kinds of things you get from a cloud service, because you have this, you're taking away all this complexity because you know exactly how it's going to run. And so that's a key part of what we're developing. And then here's the there's the YAML. Kind of boring, but it's the nitty-gritty of how it all works. And then so that's Unfurl, and so that's the tool. Is open source. You can find it on GitHub. It's, like I said, we're early startup, so it's early technology, but it's something I've been working on for a couple of years now almost. But what we're doing that's really interesting is building a SaaS platform for Unfurl. And so I'm going to show a little bit about what we're building today for that. Okay, so the first is again, we want to make it really easy for people to package, and because we're based on this technology called Tosca, there's actually some interesting open source visual tools out there to actually build these templates where people can drag and drop, and it generates these service templates. And so we're integrating that. And so we like to think of these different components like, a DNS, compute, database. They're kind of like Lego blocks. They're cloud independent Lego blocks. If I put a compute instance, it doesn't matter where it runs. And we want to make it really easy for people to build these things. So if you're an open source developer, you can just take these things, and then once you build them, you can just put this deploy button on your README page. So again, go back to the sort of canonical example of how people install open source software is they follow a list of steps on the README. And so our vision is instead, or, in addition to that, you can just have like a badge or a button and create this one-click installation process. And so the idea is you put these buttons on and that link to your service template. And then when they go to so we're building a platform that makes that really easy to do. So again, you can run the Unfurl command line tool yourself. You can fork and run these Git repositories that have these representations. But if you go on our platform, you can have a GUI for it. And so basically as example, so you click through, you can see all the requirements that you need, and then the user, well, it doesn't go into details, but basically the user could easily pick, they could swap out, I want to use, again, I need a MySQL database. Here's 4 different kinds, self-hosted, the one that runs on my cloud provider, a third-party one, etc. And then they do that, and then to actually deploy it, we can rely on OAuth flows that the different cloud providers provide to really simplify the deployment process, where it's as simple as just like, you do this on all these websites all day, you give, you log in to Google and Google says, you trust One Commons, and now we can actually go and just totally automate the deployment process. And then finally, so there's a lot of challenges open source developers have. One is the deployment, which we're just talking about. How do we make it easy to deploy? The second is open source developers don't even know who's using their software. Like people, how do you know who's using your software if you're a developer? You have so little information about that. And so one of the benefits of going through our technology is now open source developers can actually start to get information about who's using it, how they're using it. Users can get all sorts of great information. So one of the challenges with just running stuff on the cloud is, the combinations of this version and that software, it broke because this it's these complex systems with all these components. And that information is usually, we don't know the problems that happen, what kind of incidents there were, all that kind of stuff is really hidden. And because all the stuff we're creating is out in the open, all this information can bubble up and we can start to see that. And that's one of the ways that we can build this ecosystem. And so all this information can be revealed both for the users and for other users that can see how different software is working and how well it works. And then of course for the developers, and that's something that's unique and that's not really available today. And then, so finally, the next big thing for open source is the funding for open source. And that's where we get to the next poll question.
Yep, I will launch the poll here. I'm not sure if I'm going to see it on my end again because I didn't last time, but I'm launching it now.
So
everyone can see it.
Yeah, and so basically this idea is to figure out how can we have a better way to support open source, and solve these sort of business model problems. Because I mean, fundamentally, the problem is it's hard to make money if you're giving something away for free. And it's hard to get people to, and so that's the sort of the fundamental problem of open source, and so this is one idea how to do it, and it's an open question.
I can't see the answers again, so can someone let me know when we have enough?
We have how many? We have 8 answers out of 11, so 72% voted. So that's pretty.
Yeah. All right. So let's take 20 seconds until we finish this poll, just to get the last ones involved as well, and then we'll share the results with you guys. Alrighty, and there we go. I'm gonna end the poll now, and I'm gonna share results, and they should be visible. I can't see in my end, but for you guys.
Wow, so those are pretty. I think that's pretty generous answer. So half of you said you're willing to give 5%. So basically, the idea is the fundamental idea, and again, this is really early. It has to be validated, but the concept is, you're spending all this money on your Amazon bills, your hosting bills, and you're running open source. And if there was some way that people could sort of freely and equitably share just a small portion of that money to the ecosystem that people are depending on, that would really just transform the economics of open source. I think the numbers are like insane. I think the big cloud providers, it's a $300 billion revenue market. So it's like $300 billion are flowing through just the big cloud providers. And so again, just a tiny percentage would completely transform open source today. And our bet would be that would enable this free and open cloud if there is it. So I'm gonna try to hide this poll result. So yeah, so 5 and 10% is like I said, no one said 0. That's good. And that's a good answer. And so I'm just going to talk about a little bit about how we're thinking about it. And again, this is not really our focus today, but it's part of our vision. So you're spending a little bit of money, and if there is a way in which you got to choose, so you say, okay, I'm going to put aside a certain percentage, a small percentage, just kind of like you do for your Visa and MasterCard bill. You pay when you charge something, goes to those services, and then you get to choose which cloud services that you're relying on. But then each of those cloud services generally rely on another cloud service, and they certainly rely on another open source project. And then in turn, those open source projects, of course, rely on a whole thousands of other open source projects, and that's this ecosystem, that's this dependency. And the challenge has always been, well, how would we, even if the money was there, how do we figure out the right way to fund it? And so the idea we have, and so, okay, so if we do that and we have this thing, this flow of money going through, and then on top of that, there's other ways that people can earn money on top of these open cloud services, which is, they could manage the services for you and start charging fees for that. So once you have these mechanisms in places, there becomes other ways to raise the money. And then, of course, there's all sorts of consulting and outsourcing opportunities on top of that. And then, so here's the idea, which again, this is just an idea, but is that developers that are building these things can say, okay, this is why I need money. Like, it's just like a kind of a Kickstarter thing. And then when when you go deploy through a service, not just One Commons, but anyone that's part of this idea, they get to choose which of the projects that they're, of the services they're running, they get to allocate the money. So it's something that is voluntary. And so part of the key ideas for cloud funding is that we have to figure out a way that fits the ethos of open source, which means people get to choose what they want. They're essentially investing in open source projects they believe in. But then the idea that's interesting is that, okay, so they can choose, okay, well, I'm using this server, this database, or this service, I like it, so I'm going to commit to it. That open source project has to, in turn, choose a portion of their money. Maybe it's 50%. That doesn't have to be that. That's something we're out in the open, up in the air. But they get to say, okay, they have to in turn distribute their money, and so that creates a next level. And then, though that project also, as part of this network, would have to choose projects that they depend on and they believe in a certain percentage. And so that's how we create this flow. And then maybe download whatever. It can get more complicated, but that's like a very simple way that everyone can understand and gives people agency to choose what they like. And so that's this idea on top of cloud funding, which was the next step in our big vision. And then, okay, so if you remember in the beginning, the 1, 2, 3 to build this free and open cloud. So if you have these open cloud services that are shareable, forkable services, and you have a funding mechanism, then now you create this ecosystem, and this ecosystem becomes possible. And now we can have cloud services that are open, not just around the code, but around the data. So to really have a free and open service, it has to be, how do you do the data? How do you protect privacy? How do we share data? That's a whole nother presentation. but there's a whole bunch of stuff there, and there's a lot of interesting stuff. And then you have, then you get to the hosting, is if you have these cloud services that are open and shareable and transparent, and the data is open and shareable, or then that opens up a whole nother thing of hosting. And then that's where the world of the decentralized web, some of you might be familiar with that. You have all this in blockchain technology. Now you have all these new opportunities for hosting around open hosting, where your service isn't tied to any particular cloud vendor. And you can have, and that opens up another range of things. So the long-term, the free and open cloud that we're talking about comes from these 3 levels of openness. And then, so I'm going to just kind of end the slide part of the presentation with a question, really. So, Mark Andreesen, the VC, he started Netscape and built the first browser back in the day, and now he's a big name VC. Famously said, "Software is eating the world. Everything is turning into software." And what we've seen over the last 10 or 20 years is how open source software has really just come to dominate software space, especially at the infrastructure level. Linux, the entire internet runs on open source. Our phones, half our phones are run open source. And basically any kind of infrastructure type software has to be open source today, just what developers demand. So you really see how open source software it's come to dominate software. But at the same time, we're seeing cloud computing is just taking over. Everything's, like we said earlier, everything is becoming a service. People don't want to run and manage their own software anymore. And so cloud computing and cloud services are taking over. And so the question I have is, what if you had the best of both worlds? What if in this, you had these open cloud services where in the same way anyone can take open source software, it's freely available, I could use it, I can combine it, I can hack on it, I change it, I share it again, other people use it, and that's why open source has come to dominate because of that, and the knowledge we built around that. So you have all those network effects around code, which is why open source is dominated. And what if you could do the same thing with cloud services? You could just take the services, remix them, combine them, take the data, use them for your own purposes, and have a way to get paid for doing that because it's a service that costs money to run. And one of the reasons why you have these big cloud vendors at, both at the infrastructure level, but also at the consumer level with Google and Amazon, they win because of data network effects. When you have the integration around all your things being on Google and all these services that are integrated is why a company like Google wins, and why Facebook wins in the social media space, why Amazon wins in the on the e-commerce space. And so you have these data network effects, and if you can combine them, what is possible? And that's that question. It's like, I believe it would totally transform things, and that's why we're trying to build a free and open cloud. And so yeah, so that's it. Thank you. We can we can. Okay, oops, I can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'll quickly share my screen here again, and then we'll move from there to a little bit of a break. And then from there, we'll go to our questions part. But let's take approximately a 3 to 5 minute break. I need to grab some water for myself. It's pretty hot in here, as I mentioned. So let's take a break. And during the break, try to think of very thoughtful questions for Adam. And remember, you can ask anything from Adam. He has a very exciting background. So I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions to ask. So during this little water break, which is highly needed during these summer weathers, let's think of some questions for Adam as well. And let's come back in approximately 4 minutes. So 11:02 PST. All right, guys.
That was always something I've been fascinated by, and I've done other stuff. I've created a semantic wiki in the past, and so it really was just kind of almost sense of urgency. Like you could see how big proprietary cloud stuff is taking over, and it's like, well, how can we save open source in a way? But the funny thing that is about, for me, I was like, it seemed obvious. I was like, duh, open cloud services. You have open source and it's cloud services, And so I'm like, started looking around. I was like, I want to get involved in a project like that. And I looked, and there's really nothing. There's so little out there, which surprised me because again, I kind of thought it was obvious. And actually, on my website, there's a long kind of thing about open cloud services and sort of defining it and what would that mean, and it goes into a lot of details. And at the end, I kind of talk about what I found out there, but it's all pretty obscure stuff. And never, the couple ideas out there on the web like 8 years ago or 10 years ago, but never really caught on. And so, yeah, so I guess from my mind, it seemed obvious, but maybe, I don't know. I'm a weird guy, I guess. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you for that answer. And Akil, I hope that answered your question well. And I actually have like a follow-up question to that. So when you were starting this new project with for One Commons and Unfurl, so was it like the intention that made you start? Was it that for you it seemed obvious, or did you, after it seemed obvious to you, did you like spend an extensive amount doing like research and validating the obvious idea, or did you just kind of jump into it?
Yeah, I mean, this is so. Yeah, a couple of things. So one, it was like, oh, this is an obvious idea, and then you start thinking about it, and then it becomes not obvious, and then you're like, oh wait, like, what does that really mean? Open, you know, and then it became but again, it was still this way out idea. Like, it didn't really seem like, oh, I could build a startup, I could build something commercial around it. And so for me, a lot of, and I'm in San Francisco, and so there's this whole decentralized web community here, and their blockchain and all that kind of stuff. And so I've been involved with that, and they have and so part of it was, it really evolved. So this is not like, I feel like what I'm doing now is not the right way, not the right way to do a startup, or it's not the classic way. And that really, it was like a process of me playing with ideas, not really thinking it was something that I could turn into a startup and execute on. And then at some point, I think the turning point was realizing that there's a really, really compelling customer acquisition strategy around these deploy buttons. Like, this is meeting a needs. There's not a good solution out there. There's DevOps tools, which are big and complicated, and then there's people doing manual stuff, and that there is a real need for open source developers, and it's something simple and explainable, and people get it. And so that was a turning point where it went from just like, oh, here's some cool ideas, to like, no, here's something tractable that I can turn into, you know, if you do like entrepreneurial stuff, it's like, you're supposed to have 10 slides, you know, they're like problem, solution, you're supposed to have a one pager that's, you know, fits your whole business model in like a one page thing with like pretty pick colors that you can send to, you know, VCs. And so that is an exercise that really forces you to simplify.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I was just curious because like, it seemed like more something that you were really passionate about, and after that you realized, oh, there is a way to actually make
this. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. It was kind of like, oh yeah, like the startup, the stuff I've done have always been kind of you know, they're like two sides of my life. Like, okay, I have a business idea and I execute on it, and it's kind of like this tactical thing a little bit, and then there's things that interest me, and so this is like, oh wait, I could do both. So that's,
yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the optimal scenario, I think. But from here, let's jump into GitHub, because there's quite a few questions there. I'll share my screen and I'll just read the questions and you can answer them. And if we covered some of that during the presentation, you can just say it and maybe like repeat it a little bit. So let's go here. So the first one is from Akil, is that what's the future of Unfurl? Like, where do you see it in near future? Say, I guess near future is within the next 5 years.
5 years. That's wow. I'm impressed at someone's long term. 5 years seems like an eternity to me, but well, I mean, Unfurl is like I said, it's a building block. I mean, a big part of what I've been working on is figuring out how do you break down this big vision into pieces and sequence it. And so Unfurl is a command line tool. It's really, I mean, right now it just needs to get more mature. I mean, and ideally these building blocks, and again, it's not just about Unfurl, it's around this task of you know, if there could be the idea is to create some sort of community around these building blocks, just like you look at like Terraform or Ansible, there's all these components that people contribute and these providers. And so we want to build something like that. And that would be the future of Unfurl, not so much the tool, but rather these Lego building blocks for deploying services, and that's kind of what I hope to build out of that.
That's awesome. And I did get the definition of short term very wrong, but what about is the where do you see it in a year, for example? Is it still like making the product more mature, or is there like significant updates?
Yeah, I think it's total. I mean, right now, like I said, we just started like 3 months ago, so the technology is very immature, and buggy and limited, and all the ways that products are. But I mean, the future is really the SaaS platform, which again, that's open source too, just to be clear. So people can take that and run that also. But ultimately, to make something really, again, sort of sort of dog food my own. I mean, everything is moving to the cloud, so I'm building a command line tool. It would be, I believe that the future is not going to be the command line tool, but rather the SaaS version of it that's running in the cloud, and that people just want to be able to click through and deploy through there. So that's really, it's just going to become I see it just as the engine behind the service, as opposed to a separate entity.
Yeah. Okay. That makes total sense. And that is a really cool and I guess validated idea, because more and more stuff are moving to cloud. So including our Zoom, which we are on. So I guess the next question, which I took from the chat and posted here from the Zoom chat, is that is open source somehow restricted in regular cloud IaaS?
No, I mean, so generally with a commercial IaaS provider, you can run whatever you want. I mean, as long as you're not breaking the law, and then you can get shut down, like we saw that, with Parler or whatever. But other than that, I mean, one of the big differences between like an open cloud and a proprietary cloud is you don't know what's running on there, and there's no transparency. So no, there isn't any. And in fact, one of the paradoxes and one of the things that upsets a lot of people in the open source world is that those IaaS, they run on open source. I mean, again, their database services is the same open source project. So like going back to what I was saying, one of the slides, you're always kind of choosing, like, do I run Cassandra myself, or do I run the version of, the version of it that, or Elasticsearch, or any of these big things. So basically they're already running open source, and they're making money off it. And that's part of the challenge of open source, is to figure out how to fix that.
Perfect. I hope that answered the question well, and I think it definitely did. The next question was posted at the very beginning of this webinar, and I felt like your presentation kind of went over this. But the question was that how is the connection between Unfurl and open cloud?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I didn't go into more details, again, it's, depends on how technical we want to be, but the core concept just at the software level is this notion of ensembles, which are these reproducible cloud deployments. And so the fundamental connection, besides, sort of just being a strategy to build it, but the technical level is that Unfurl lets you create ensembles, and ensembles are open source services that are forkable, shareable, clonable. You can move them around so that they run on one service and move them over somewhere else. And so that's the technical connection. Unfurl, I built it again. So I built Unfurl solving backwards. Like, if we had built, and I have a slide, I didn't show it actually. It's actually in the deck past the thank you, that basically talks about the requirements of an open cloud. And again, it's kind of technical, but basically that's the connection. It's trying to help you build open cloud services.
That makes sense. And thank you for that answer. I think that answered the question really well. And the next one is that it's a little bit more common question, but I think it's really interesting actually. So sir, how can we contribute to open cloud and Unfurl? And can you mention some failures you faced in your career from which students can learn?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, well, one, it's Unfurl is, you can go to GitHub/uncommons, and it's open source, and you can sign up. The SaaS stuff is still really in flux. It's open source too, but it's not really that usable. But you can sign up on our website, and we'll send you stuff so you can get a private invite to join to see the SaaS business. And also, we're hiring, just to say, if you're a developer, we're here in San Francisco, but we'll support people working remotely, and we're both looking for contractors. We're looking for people to play with Unfurl, build little components, and we because it's immature, we're funding some people to do that. And then of course we're startup desperate to build a team. So that's, if anyone's interested in that, can't forget to plug that. Yeah. And then, okay, failures. Okay, there's a lot of failures. I think, well, I fundamentally, everything is always harder than you think it will be. I think if you want the things I've learned starting companies is that it'll be, oh, this is easy, it's a great idea, we'll just do this thing and we'll put it out there, and then everything gets harder, and then you expect things that you think are gonna be short term end up sucking you in for a long time. So what I would say for a student is really, like, I mean, it's all stereotypical stuff, I guess people say, but really just like, do what you really are passionate about, and not be like, and don't compromise around that, because you'll end up probably getting stuck in something that you'll do for a lot longer than you expect you would, and then you'll regret it. And so that's, I mean, that's yeah. And then also, I mean, another failure, I can think of lots of failures, so this is an easy one for me. I think for me, it's like, I guess, kind of being an entrepreneurial kind of guy, kind of like you think, oh, you can do it yourself, you can do it on your own, you can bootstrap it or whatever. And I think being humble around that, and really figuring out who you have to reach out to and connect to make something successful is also a lesson that I've had to learn over the years.
The importance of networking. This is what these events are also for everyone who wants to network. So that's a great answer. Thank you so much. And there's comments in the chat thanking you for the answers as well in the Zoom chat. And the next question is regarding to the poll asking how much of cloud expenses we can contribute to open source. My question is how Unfurl can save the cloud expenses. As I understood, we still are using cloud, and Unfurl is just a better interface. Please correct me if I understood wrongly.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a really good question. So fundamentally, if you look at, there's a difference between a managed service and self-hosting. So if your application needs, say, a Postgres database, if you run the Postgres database yourself, it's going to be a lot cheaper. Even if you're running on Amazon, if you use Amazon's RDS service for Postgres versus you just running your own Postgres, you're both on Amazon, but Amazon is charging a very large premium for using RDS. So it's generally always going to be cheaper from a raw billing perspective to use the self-hosted version. Of course, on the other hand, then you have to run it yourself, and there's costs around that. But so fundamentally, open cloud services in that way are going to be cheaper than the managed proprietary service. And one of the big ideas is this, essentially the way that if there's a way to make it easy to run those self-hosted versions, and we can talk all that, Unfurl just sort of scratches the surface on that, then essentially we're commoditizing the underlying hosting providers like Amazon, and we're just using them for their raw things that we're never going to beat them at, which is the compute power, disk spaces. There's no way you can compete with that. And so that's fundamentally. And then yeah, I mean, we could say like, yeah, well then if you're saving money, then you might as well give some to open source. That's the second step, and that's a voluntary thing ultimately, I think. But but basically that is the value proposition there.
Awesome. That's a really great answer. And same person also provided feedback. It would be great to make multiple choose polls, which we had some of them, but even more, but the questions were great. So thank you for the feedback. We'll of course make a note on that. And then we have our last question from Stuti, which is just that what are some good resources a beginner can get started with? Probably for like Unfurl.
I mean, it's unfortunately we are working on documentation. It's a challenge. I mean, I think there are simple things you could do with it. I mean, I think that would be the easiest way. It's still rough. I think the SaaS platform will be a lot easier to use. But actually, it would be amazing to get feedback on what seems, what makes sense and what doesn't. If you wanted to do that, that would be the best I could say in terms of as a beginner, because we want to, obviously documentation and getting is super important for new technology like this, and yeah. So
yeah, I mean, that basically makes sense. As you mentioned, it's still a very early stage product. So are you most likely feedback is what is helpful for you as well in this in this stage. So everyone, including you, to keep that in mind. If you want to check out Unfurl, it's a great help for their team to provide feedback about the product. And Sako, I see you have your hand up,
I have
so
so
go
many
ahead
questions,
and ask your
so that's why I kept for the end. So first of all, thank you so much, Adam, for joining us today. Because I work as also DevOps, so I have like multiple questions. And
great.
So yeah, I think so right now is you see that the DevOps, we use a Terraform and we deploy it in the AWS cloud. So in that sense, it's gonna be the infrastructure we have, which is in Terraform. So is it kind of more moving all these pieces into YAML and making it cloud agnostic? Is that the main target?
I think the big way to think it is it wraps Terraform. So we support Terraform, and obviously Terraform in some ways is the closest to what we're trying to do, because it's a declarative specification, and there's a huge ecosystem around Terraform. So basically, I think this is drilling into it is, if you already have, the thing about Terraform is you built your Terraform, like I said, it's for using the AWS provider. If you want to say use Google, you have to change your Terraform. And so the idea with what you're doing with Unfurl is, if you broke up your Terraform, in modules, and then you use a YAML to say this Terraform module is for GCP and this one's for Amazon, you can easily swap them out. And so you have this level of flexibility around it. Like with Terraform, you tend to end up with this big monolithic thing. Your entire infrastructure is gonna starts as this thing and it all gets deployed, and you can't really easily mix and match different Terraform things, because you don't have sort of an abstraction around the configuration modules. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. So in this case, but still the application which currently using, let's say we are using like Helm, you will still need it. Yeah, it's also reflects that as well.
Yeah, so we support Helm. So the idea is to hide that from the user. So one way I'm thinking about it is like it's a low code DevOps solution. So if you've already built a big Terraform thing, then you're pretty sophisticated, and you're not exactly our target market. I mean, the other side with what we're doing is, because we store everything in Git, so I don't know if you're using like remote state in Terraform, or using
remote state, it's Terraform Cloud. Yeah.
So you're using Terraform, exactly. So you're like kind of like you're getting locked into their HashiCorp cloud.
Yeah, we used it also like in store in S3, the state in local as well. But yeah, it makes it easy.
So one of the benefits is all that you still can get the benefits of like using a Terraform cloud, but it's all in your Git repository. all that state, so you can use your normal developer workflow and not have to have like a separate kind of world of Terraform Cloud, which is, I don't know, yeah, that's all the thing. Terraform Cloud is very enterprise kind of, I don't know, maybe you have a different impression of it. It's not very like user friendly for just a regular person.
Yeah, I think in general, they have some limitation around the user number and so on. It's definitely, once you grow, it's up to 5 users, you can have 3. But the thing is, if you put in GitHub, like secrets, everything, how it's gonna do this part?
Oh, well, yeah. Well, like I said, so secrets is super important to keep those separate. So basically we manage, again, we're getting into the details here, but Unfurl manages multiple Git repositories to represent it. So you'll have a private Git repository that would have all your state, and then you'd have the public specification in a separate one. Your secrets would probably be like in a HashiCorp vault or whatever we support. Ansible, we did.
Secrets manager.
The secrets would be separate, and making sure everything's tainted and separate. Like that's a big part of what we developed, was to make sure, and actually. And HashiCorp is, yeah, and so they have a sensitive flag, and so we respect the sensitive flag inside the Terraform, configurations, and make sure that we support, make sure the data stays tainted as it goes through. So yeah, so that's exactly right. That's super important to get that right, or else no one's gonna want to use the software.
Yeah, I think I'm getting better understanding. So pretty much, you have this Terraform, Helm, Ansible, all this stuff. It's kind of abstraction layer on top of it, which underlying that's gonna help you bring infrastructure plus your application. Yeah, is that correct?
Yeah, and so if you're like, again, you can, so it's almost like, how there's like open API or Swagger for REST APIs. Yep. Imagine the same thing for like a DevOps process or a command line tool, where I can have a description of, this provides this functionality. Here's how you deploy it. Here's all the dependencies on it. It's a package. I can share that with someone else, and he don't have to care about what's inside it. He just has to know, okay, this can connect to DNS server and update and add a domain name. Maybe there's 10 different implementations for 10 different DNS servers. I don't care. I don't want to know, and that's kind of the idea, that you have this level of encapsulation.
Interesting. But so let's say in this case, if you have this Helm and all this stuff, so it will also give you opportunity to select, for example, Nginx or Envoy proxy, and then version release, and it should go pull from upstream, and kind of, is that the vision?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, once you get to the software level, if Nginx has a different piece of functionality, or say that's where the Tosca, like you're basically designing, you define again these interface definitions. So it's not like a magic solution if the software does different things, but there's like a suite of stacks that basically 90% of applications work. So our goal is, if we could just support those particular stacks and those particular components, then it becomes really easy to swap out. So say you want Mongo and you have a self-hosted version, and I decide, I want to upgrade to the commercial version because I don't want to deal with the headaches of backing up my own data or whatever. You just do a simple configuration change, everything else stays the same, and we can automate the migration, or like that's the vision around it. And so that's where the flexibility that comes in, because it's like, okay, I need a Mongo database. I don't care where it lives, or how, I don't care where it is, but from the other components don't care. And then again, when you feed it to the engine, then it can figure out the right actual implementations to use to deploy. And then again, storing that state. So managing, okay, I can actually know how to migrate this data, to another store. Like those are the kinds of things that higher level semantics that a tool like Terraform doesn't tackle at all.
Yeah, I think so this part is clear. So it's more replacing configuration management, all this tooling. And then now coming to the hosting, there is also, I don't know if you also work with Cloud Foundry. I think they were doing similar, that for the hosting part, that you kind of host your own infrastructure, and then there is for static content, there is Netlify, and so obviously public cloud. So how it in this can come as into the picture?
You just named a lot of things there, but like say with Netlify or so they're providing. So a couple of things, like so Cloud Foundry or Heroku, it's like in some ways our vision is creating an open source Heroku, right? Or so in that sense, make it as easy as Heroku, but with these open source components that can run anywhere instead of their service. And same with Netlify. Netlify is for Jamstack type stuff. They'll host and deploy Jamstack, and then they're bringing all the services. Again, they're building a proprietary service around that. And so if we can create an ecosystem where people can create those components and run it themselves, then we're essentially like an open source Netlify. Again, these are very big, ambitious things, but that's not like tomorrow, but that's kind of the vision of what you can get if you have an open cloud.
So the point is, okay, these behind like Netlify, Cloud Foundry, or even the public cloud that kind of make open source version in a way that any like machines you can just go run and it will just out of box gonna do stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So like Netlify, it's like, well, yeah, you connect to Netlify and then you deploy onto their platform. But what if you had a similar piece of software, but you got to choose where to deploy on and deploy it onto your own accounts? Well, Netlify is a little bit different pieces of Jamstack, but basically that's fundamentally they're trying to create a platform that they control, and that's where they're going to create their value. And we're trying to create something that we don't control, and anyone could run on their own services.
Yeah, I think at this point, as a next step for me, I would need just to go and try out and come with more questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Axel, you can take it.
And I'm learning how to explain it better too. Again, right? So everything.
Your product definitely fits like our agenda of this chapter, because it's been a lot of open source. So this is like a perfect addition from a different perspective, in my opinion, to our open source team. But let's go and get back to the presentation here. Yep. So this we already completed. So just to quickly wrap up, as Adam mentioned, some exciting news that he's looking for engineers, supports remote work, and he's also looking for feedback for his product. So you have a lot of ways to contribute for this project, actually, because feedback really is probably at any early stage product is very crucial. So here are Adam's information. So you can find him from LinkedIn on a handle Adam Souzis. So just I hope I said the name somewhat right, but Adam Souzis with his name. You can also obviously just search with his name and he will pop up. And his email is adam@onecommons.org. So that is his work email that you can reach out to as well. And this presentation will be shared during early next week to our YouTube and GitHub. So you can always come back and look at the contact information again, so you don't have to remember everything from this one for the audience. And this really wraps up our session. So please, people, join us for our future events. We have another webinar tomorrow with Metabob CTO Avinash Gopal, who will talk about data collection and processing for AI, which will also be another exciting session. And thank you so much, Adam, for coming to talk to us today. Your background is super exciting, and this session was just amazing and fits our theme of open source greatly. So truly big thanks to you for taking the time to come speak to our community, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This was fun.
Yeah, I agree. This was a very fun session. And people here who joined the audience, remember that we're constantly looking for community managers, tech writers, in and out ambassadors, marketing creators and editors, course creators, and project creators. There's a link to also our website, unfurl.com to Gope's website, and also Metabob's website if someone wants to try out an AI-assisted debugging tool for Python code that is available for every individual user for free. And they are also looking for feedback on their product. So it is a similar case to Adam's product. And as I said, thank you everyone for joining. Special thanks to Adam for being here. This was a great session and I enjoyed every second of it. And I think your background is super exciting. But this really concludes our webinar. And Sako, Nurlana, do you have anything to add?
I just want to thank you, Adam, again, joining us. And it's like our also community, you see, it's more like informal. We do it in our weekend in friendly way, just to get to know each other. And as a community, the rules for infrastructure and for the cloud you were mentioning, pretty much we have for community. Everybody can come from community, run this kind of event. So I think at some point we can put things together and connect them. So I think that will be like more autonomous community and infrastructure in a way. Thank you, Axel, Nurlana. It was really great.
I also want to add one thing from my side. There was a sticker in the beginning. I want to learn as much as possible today. And I really did. Thank you so much, Adam, for your time, for your efforts. And it really was so inspiring and clear, even for people who are not non-tech, I think. It was really very clear and descriptive. Thank you so much.
Yep, and I agree with Nurlana. I'm not a technical person either. I'm a marketing guy, and I still thought that I understood most of the presentation, and it helps me to kind of dig deeper in this tech space that I'm currently in as well. So thank you, Adam, so much, and thank you everyone for joining. Remember that we have another session coming up tomorrow at 10 a.m. PST, normal usual time, same link to join. Everyone who has signed up through the Google Forms will be provided a link to join today as well, but it is zoom.gopass.com to join. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Adam.
And one more time, I forget to mention, please don't forget to start the project and start contributing for Unfurl. And I see the documentation and all these links we will also share in our Slack and public channels. And just, if you missed it, just get back to one of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Adam. Everyone loved it here. So that was great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. See you.